what does holistically masculine or like healthy masculinity, how would you define that?
Whoa, that's a really cool question. No, I've never been asked that. Okay.
No pressure.
I think maybe some of the my favorite men in my life, something that they embody is not the absence of strength, but the ability to know how and when to use the strength that they have.
Welcome to 3%. We're your hosts, Jamie Haig.
And I'm Blake Roberts.
We're two best friends, fathers, husbands, and just two guys trying to figure it out.
We're also therapists, which is probably a pretty important part.
That's true.
And we believe that at our best, people are 97% honest with themselves and others, and it's that hidden 3% of emotions, needs, desires, and behaviors that we keep to ourselves that keep us bound to shame and loneliness, from which many of our issues stem.
Each week on this podcast, we'll interview leaders in the fields of psychology, theology, arts, and athletics to explore holistic masculinity. We're not here to tell you the man you need to be, but we are here to help you explore what gets in the way of being the man you want to be.
We're going to help you develop courage and give you the tools to share your 3% in the relationships that matter most so you can more deeply connect with yourself, God, and others. So, pull up a chair.
Let's get into it.
So let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 3%. Got to buckle up today.
Oh my gosh.
Because we have a really special guest on, a family member of mine.
First family episode.
Wow.
First female episode. And we find it really important for us to have diverse voices speaking into what it means for us to be holistically masculine, to be emotionally engaged, as we're just pursuing understanding ourselves better. We don't want to just have one singular type of voice.
Yeah.
And so we invited Jasmine here first because she's one of our favorite female voices, and especially mine. As you'll hear in a second, I am obsessed with this cousin of mine. Jasmine is the coolest musician I know. She is in a band called The New Respects. If you have not heard of them, where have you been?
Stop listening to us and just go listen to the music.
Literally stop listening to us right now. You're already on Spotify, probably. So just hop over and then please come back. What I want you to know about Jazz is she's the lead singer of a band called New Respects. Jazz, you might have a cleaner way to say this, but they're a band that I grew up around, and then they were the John Hancock Band, which was legendary.
That was what you were called first?
Yeah, that was a little secret that Jamie just spilled the beans.
Yeah,
That was the worst name ever.
I spilled the beans, but also I still have a John Hancock Band t-shirt.
No way.
I sure do.
Wow, it's a relic.
I like The New Respects. I
Yeah,
like
me too.
that.
It's much better.
Yeah. And 10 years ago now,
Yeah.
you guys got signed and started making incredible rock and roll music with awesome messages, really fun. I just really hope everybody will go check y'all out.
Collaborating with some big names, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
One of my favorite rappers, Toby Nwigwe, you guys have done stuff with.
Yeah.
He's fire.
I mean, it's across the board, too. My favorite band of all time is Switchfoot. Jasmine knows this.
Yeah.
And they got to tour a number of times with Switchfoot. And Jasmine, this is how thoughtful Jasmine is. She was out on tour with Switchfoot, and I'm texting them probably a lot, fangirling from afar.
What do they smell like?
Yeah, right. And Jasmine gets John Foreman, the lead singer of Switchfoot, to record a video telling me I'm his best friend.
No way.
And sends it to me. And it's saved in a special folder on my phone now for whenever I need encouragement.
I love that. I didn't know that story.
So
Awesome.
Jasmine is not just an amazing musician. She has also written a number of children's musicals for the local church and the church abroad. I hope more people will take her musicals and do them because they're incredible. She does them here at the Belonging.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's sweet.
All the children's musicals they do there. Jasmine wrote them.
That's awesome.
With another good friend, Sydney. Shout out, Sydney.
Shout out.
Jasmine is also I guess across the board, you're a writer. That's what I am articulating right now. You write music, you write musicals, and one of the coolest things is to see you go from, I know this is something from your past, but the writing has always been a part of you.
Yeah.
But for it to go from in your head and your heart to like fun Instagram stories about a ring that you love to writing a narrative to that then taking the shape of a book to then you putting that out into the world for other people to read and have fun with has been a very fun journey to watch from not even that far away. But all this to say, I'm very proud that you're my cousin. I'm very glad that you're coming on this show. And one of the things that we focus a lot on in our podcast is developing vulnerability and honesty within ourselves so that we can have better relationship with ourselves, God, and others. And I feel like you have done a really good job of being vulnerable through your writing and through your art. So I thought you would be an encouragement to have to help encourage that in others. So welcome.
Whoa, I don't even know what to say. That is so very kind. And I love being your cousin. I'm so thankful to be here.
Is there anything else that you would want to add to like who you are, Jasmine, that I left out? Because I think I got caught up in bragging about you.
Oh my gosh. No, I mean, I have just been so blessed to be able to write a bunch of fun things, but I think the things that I am learning to value the most about who I am now are being a cousin and a sister and a friend. And so it's been cool to cultivate all of who I am as a person and then kind of see it bleed onto paper later. And so I don't know, writing has just felt really fun and full these days. And I have no idea what I'm doing ever, but I am really pumped to be able to have a new story that just seems to pop in my heart. And I'm okay, Lord, teach me how to steward it. So it's been really fun journey.
So what we're talking about is the new book series that you've come out for young adults, which is about Ben Washington.
Yeah.
There's 2 books. One came out a couple of years ago.
Last year. Both of them came out last year.
Okay. So the first one's Newbie on the Block. Yeah. And then the second one.
Newbie
on the Block.
Ooh, that's a great name.
Thank you.
And then the second one is Odd Man Out. And could you, for Blake, kind of rewind the tape? I know I
absolutely
talked about where it came from, but just speak to how this came about for you.
Totally. First, I'll give you a little synopsis, but Ben Washington is the Newbie on the Block. It's a middle grade book about a boy named Ben Washington, and he and his family, they move from Atlanta, Georgia to a tiny town called Radnor Falls, Wisconsin, which is not real, but it's real in our hearts. There's not a lot there. There's not a lot going on in Radnor Falls. There's cows everywhere and cornfields, and Ben's not excited about it for several reasons. One, because he's just really used to city life. He's really used to people who know him really well, and he's 12, and making friends at 12 is really hard.
Yeah.
And then also he is acutely aware once he gets there that there aren't a lot of people that look like him and his family because they're an African American family. They're just not a lot of Black people in his town. And so he's okay, what does it mean for me to be different in this new city that's already weird to be a new person in general? And how do I make friends? Because it's always been easy for him to have friends because he grew up in Atlanta. And so he kind of has to go on this journey of one, knowing who he is so that even if he's not always accepted, he can accept himself, but also finding people who really love him. He finds maybe not a ton of friends that first book, but he finds 2 really incredible deep friendships, one with a boy at school named Kenny, and then one with a neighbor who also the town maybe has some judgments about who he might be. And Ben kind of has to decide, in the same way that I don't want to be judged, can I judge this man or not? You know, the first book kind of like is about that. And then the second book is a continuation of Ben's story, and it's more about friendships. His old best friend Zion is going to come to town during like a school break. And he's really nervous about his old best friend and new best friend meeting because he's like, they don't really have anything in common except for me. So what are we going to do? Just like sit around and talk about me all day? And and they get to town, or Zion gets to town. And one thing about Ben is he's horrible at sports and he hates sports. He's like really into video games and books. His dad like owns a bookstore, but he's not so into sports. But Zion and Kenny both love basketball. And so they start a friendship based around basketball. And he's like, I can't relate to this at all. And so it's kind of about, what do you do when, you know, your friends have their own friendship, and like how to, you know, kind of let go where you need to let go and step in where you are supposed to step in, and not maybe throw everything out, not like the baby out with the bathwater on everything. And so it's been so much fun to write. It's like, I don't really know all the way where it came from. It started, like Jamie said, like I kind of forgot till you said it. I was on a tour and I bought this ring, and the ring, I still have it upstairs, but I don't wear it very often. It's like a Native American chief. And this story like just came to me, and it was originally, the book was called Ben Washington and the Lonely Chief. And it was about Ben, and the neighbor was this man who was like the grandson of a Native American chief. And everybody had like these ideas about him, and that definitely, it shifted. But I think the integrity of what I was trying to convey kind of stayed, where it's like just about like, do we trust our first instincts about people all the time, or do we allow them to tell us who they are and like sit with them a little longer than the first initial ideas we have about them? And so it's been a blessing for me, because I kind of have to like sit and like wrestle with those questions myself, and not just like throw them away. But if I'm like, I think kids' stories explain things in a way that adult stories, sometimes we can be like gratuitous, but with kids, you kind of have to just say it. And
Yeah.
so I think it's been like really cool to like have to just say it to myself and be like, what do I think about this? Am I right about this? Or do I need to like challenge this? And that's been cool. Really cool.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I have so many questions, and I know you probably have so many questions or things to say. Okay, so something I was curious about as you were talking about the kind of creation of this book is, I think there's this universal feeling that most people can have, which is feeling misunderstood, or being, to steal the book title, the odd man out.
Totally.
In my family system, in the social circles I'm in, and maybe that is a part of like not understanding or being connected with myself fully. And so then, you know, kind of in return, people aren't connected with me because I'm not connected with myself.
Yeah.
So that's like a universal thing that I think a lot of people can relate to. And what I'm curious about for you is this, I guess this would be fiction, right?
Yeah.
This would be a fiction book. Is there elements of this story that are personal to you in a different way? Because for the listeners who are listening but aren't watching, or who haven't known of Jasmine, you're mixed.
Yeah.
And I've heard from friends, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell me if this isn't your experience, but from friends or even clients, I've heard that there's an even like different, or maybe just more complex or nuanced level of feeling misunderstood or left out, or being the odd man out as somebody who is mixed, because there can be sort of this question of like, where do I really fit in? Because I don't fully here, or I don't fully there, or so like, how do I carve that place out for me? And so we have this like universal feeling that people can relate to, of feeling misunderstood or being the odd man out. But then there are some people who have a totally different experience of that in this embodied way, because like you said with Ben Washington, like when you don't look the same as the people around you, and there's all these social and cultural messages about that. That can be a really, I imagine, because I don't fully relate to it, complex experience. So I'm just curious, like, A, how all of that just felt that I said, and then B, is some of the themes that come out in the book like personal to you?
Those are really good questions. I think that, thanks for asking, first of all.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think for me, being mixed, it's really interesting. I literally on Sunday just had a conversation with a friend about being mixed because she had some questions too. And I feel like I have maybe a unique experience because I have so many mixed friends, and I think everybody kind of has their own wrestlings with it. My parents, for all of their other things, something they did so well is growing up, they were so serious about being like, you don't have to choose. Like, if anyone asks you, which one are you do not have to choose. Like, you're both. You embody both. I feel like for most of at least my childhood, like, I was so passionate about the fact that I was like, I'm Black, I'm white, I am mixed, I am both. I am, I am all. And I would have like people at school, like, for sure, who would be like, but if you had to, like, no, you have to choose right now, like, which one are you going to choose? Like, right now, if you had to,
3, 2, 1, 3,
3, 2, 1,
2,
go.
1.
And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, and so I just remember like feeling like that. But I also had this other feeling. And I think that this is where I'm like, I think it's different for everyone. I was raised mostly by Black women. Like, most of my rearing was like my mother, my grandmother on my mom's side, my aunties, all of them, I was in their care like 24/7. So I think that there was this other thing that was like, I'm a biracial Black woman. And when I grow up, these are the women I'm going to become. And like, I was this both, and I was like, and this is my future. And so I think that there is like this real tethering to being Black and also biracial, which is so strange and something I'm always like doing like maybe a little archaeology on. But I don't really have the same sense that I've heard from a lot of mixed people of the wrestling of where do I fit? And I feel really thankful for that. And I honestly can't tell you all the way how it happened. Except for, I just feel like I was really loved by a lot of people growing up, and I'm really thankful for that. Like, I was loved so well by Aunt Terry, Jamie's mom, and I was so loved by my auntie, who's my mom's sister, and I never felt weird in either of their presence. And I think my church was like that. Like, my church literally looked like the kingdom of God when I was a kid. It was like all different kinds of people. There's so many people who looked like me and so many people who didn't. And like, that includes biracial people. So that was like such a blessing that I, as an adult, I'm like, I can't believe that was my norm.
Yeah.
I think because it was my norm, it wasn't until I got a little older that maybe the disjointedness started to come up, where I was like, oh, that's not normal. It's not normal for people to be so different but love each other, Wow. And so I think I have a little bit less of I don't know where I fit, but I've talked to so many people who do. I'm sure even within my own family, like, I have family members who would feel differently about it if they were, biracial. And so I think it's just like something I'm always like, okay, tell me your story. And I can understand maybe some of the feelings, but I just don't have that in my own book, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just feel really thankful for like what I kind of got to like be steeped in when I was little. And when it comes to race, I just had to do different work when I got older because it did change. But I'm so thankful for that time.
That's beautiful because I'll let you go next. I just want to say one more thing. Because you can write from a place of this experience that you're talking about that maybe somebody else didn't have growing up.
Yeah.
But like, you've had a taste of it and can offer some sort of like, this is what it can be like for somebody who is mixed or somebody who's not, but just has that, can relate to the maybe more universal feeling of being left out or being misunderstood. And because it sounds like you had the beautiful gift of a lot of people, not perfectly, obviously, but handling the nuance and complexity of just your personhood,
Yeah.
A lot of
which is
people
pretty
trying.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That is interesting to hear, even for me, from you. There's a couple things about it now that you're talking I'm like surprised by. One, you're writing about boys,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool. And it feels like a relatable headspace when I'm reading it, that I forget it's written by not a boy.
Okay, good.
And then and then these feelings of newbie on the block and odd man out are so relatable and visceral that it feels like it had to come from a place of authenticity of experience.
Totally.
Or like pain.
Totally.
So how do you feel like you were able to like lock into those?
Yeah, that's a good question. One, I'm so glad that when you read it, you don't say, "Oh, that sounds like an old lady named Shirley," Sounds so that's good. I think the boy thing, I actually have wondered several times why, because I would have thought I would have naturally written a story about a girl, but I wonder if it has anything to do with I only have brothers. And I think about them a lot when I make things. So, and they're younger than me. They're not, they're both adults now, but I always am thinking about leaving something for them to understand themselves better and me as well. So the younger portion of my life was so steeped in understanding that it was weird for me when I, maybe about high school age, started to have conversations with people my age and older about race, about blackness that were not positive. And so I think maybe some of what felt like rejection and confusion and otherness came from starting probably 14, 15 years old. I went to a high school around then, and the school I had been to was much like my church. It was just everybody was there.
Where was this?
In an elementary school, New Hope Academy in
Oh, yeah.
Franklin.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I didn't realize
they
you were from
were
here.
amazing.
She's a unicorn. From here.
From
Yeah,
here.
you and
Born
Shelley.
raised. In that
Nashville, for
school,
all of those
literally, I'm like, if I
listening.
ever have kids, they have to go to New Hope Academy. Like, they have
Yeah.
to. Just amazing. And so, my
This is
school
not
was
a
like that.
sponsor.
Not sponsored by Benji.
Yeah,
But
I
you know
mean,
what?
yeah.
Why not?
Sure.
Yeah,
But also,
why
if you're
not?
listening to
Right,
this,
come on now,
no.
New Hope.
Okay, sorry, keep going.
And then so middle school, I was kind of homeschooled. I was traveling all over with my mom, and the kids on the road with us, same thing. We all looked different, and we all loved each other. Then we get to high school. I was one of 2 black people in the school, at least in the upper school. There was every once in a while somebody in the lower school who was like something else.
For those who maybe haven't grown up in this area, because I did not know what lower school and upper school was until, well, it's probably not this area. I just grew up in public schools, but what is lower school and upper school?
So sorry. Lower school is, from my understanding, elementary and middle. And then our upper school was just referring to high school.
It definitely makes it sound like this is the good one and this is the
Yeah.
less than
All
one.
These
the
are where
not
the
so
lesser
great
kids were
kids,
sent.
they went to the lower school. And
Jazz
if
is
you
like-
were
Jazz is like, I
cute
just wanna
and
clarify,
cool, you go
I
into
was
the
in
upper
the-
school.
Upper school.
I was in the upper school, and then there was the medium schools, like the mid kids.
This is where we put the odd men out in the
This is the
lower
odd man out, right?
The mid kids.
I'm gonna write a book called The Mid Kids.
Oh, that's good.
And when I got to high school, I should say, there was one other black person. It was a boy, and we were in the same class, and everybody was like, "Y'all should date." It was like, why?
Wow.
Tell me why.
Yeah.
We have nothing in common.
Oh my gosh.
But he was so cool, actually. Hope he's doing great.
Shout out that kid.
Shout out that kid. I just was shocked. I remember feeling shocked. My school, I won't name names. Love you guys, wherever you are. But they taught some things that were just so shocking to me at the time about kind of like race, but especially about like slavery and states' rights and all these things that I just I had just never heard their takes on it before. And I ended up having a lot of conversations about, like, I would ask some of my teachers, like, what's going on? Like, why are we learning this? And then some of them had like really good answers for me, and she would be like, I don't know. Like, it's just always been like this. And then some of them would be like, well, this is the truth. And I was like, interesting. Okay. Like, we would talk about like some slaves like to be slaves, like, because they were treated so well. And I was like, what? That's like, no, I don't think so, you know? And I think because we were learning some of that, and I had learned something completely different my whole life. My mother in my house, she would always be like, give so much dignity to our history. And my father too. But it was always this conversation of like, don't forget that if people made it over on the slave ships and they didn't die, that means they were the strongest of the strong and they stayed alive. And that means you're a descendant of the strongest of the strong. And I always carried that kind of a thing with me where I was like, I have strength in my lineage. I have beauty in my lineage. Like, there were kings and queens that came before me, and on both sides. And so I think, like, to get there and for it to be like, it felt so dismissive of the beauty of where I came from. It felt sad to me. And I think our school was centered around history. Like, the whole school was centered around, we would meet twice a week, the whole high school, and we would learn a history lesson 2 times a week. And then all of our classes were centered around the history lessons. And each year we'd learn something, a different like portion of history. In American history, we never talked about Black history once.
Really?
There was one lecture about Frederick Douglass, and that was it. And so it just was like, I remember having a conversation with someone about it, and I was like, well, why don't we learn about Black history? And they're like, well, we can't learn about everyone's history. If we learn about your history, then we have, and then, so I think it just made me go, what? You know?
Yeah.
And then at that school, I wasn't mixed. I was Black. It was like, you're the Black girl. Can you teach me how to Dougie? I'm like, actually, I don't know how to do the Dougie. I'm so sorry. You know, like, I'll literally only read Shakespeare all day. So, so I just like felt so like, what'd you say?
Nothing. That was a bad joke.
Oh,
I said I could teach you how to shake.
I can teach you how to shake. Smear.
Shakespeare.
He hates on me for my dad jokes, and here he comes.
That was a good one. I
Rubbing off on
liked
me.
it though.
Stop.
It was good. It was great. And so I think I just felt so like, it felt like whiplash in this weird way, because it's not like that had been my normal experience. Like, my school growing up was like, Rosa Parks was supposed to come speak to us, you know, like, then she died like the day before or something, but it was sad. But it's just like, there was so much like celebration and dignity given to my history growing up that by the time I got to a place where it wasn't, it almost like, it was completely opposite. I was like, what's going on? Like, I'm so confused right now. I didn't know anyone still thought like this at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, plus the Black thing, and being Black wasn't really that cool yet. So like, there was like the straightening of the hair. I just want to fit in. I want to, like, I'm so shy and scared, and I want y'all to like me. And there were so many things that ended up happening at that school that I just never told my mom until I graduated. She's like, why did you tell me? I was like, I didn't want you to make a scene. And I think I just like naturally felt so othered, and I didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And everybody wasn't like that. Like, there were some really kind people too, but I think I just didn't know I was different until I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where it was birthed. And I've never really graduated from kids' books. So to me, I'm like, if it was going to come out anywhere, that's probably where it was going to come out.
Yeah.
What does it even mean to graduate from kids' books, though? Because what you
Yes.
said earlier hit me so hard, that if you can communicate it clearly to a kid, it makes you engage with the actual content for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I do think we get really, you said gratuitous, which I think is the perfect word for it. Like, I think we get gratuitous in explaining ideas in a way that we can almost like palate the discomfort of some of the ideas that we're living in agreement with. But then you're saying, writing it for a kid makes you go, do I agree with this or disagree with this? Because I've got to say it clearly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Some of the best books that I have read have been since I became a dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
reading kids' books to Charlotte.
Yeah. Like, I think about this a lot with Taylor and the Rabbit. Have you read Taylor and the Rabbit?
I don't think so.
It's this book about this little boy, Taylor, who has built this giant wooden tower. And Leo has the whole thing memorized. I actually recorded him reading it to me. But he says, one day it all came crashing down.
Oh, yes. It's called The Rabbit Listened.
Yeah.
But the boy's
that
name is
one.
Taylor.
Yeah. Sorry. Leo calls it Taylor and the Rabbit, and now I renamed the book.
That's my favorite kids' book that we
Yeah.
have. Do you know it, Jazz?
Yes, I think because Jamie told me about it, and then I went to my therapist's office, and it happened to be there,
That's
and
right.
I read it. It was
I've
so
read
good.
the book to clients before in session.
It's so good. For everybody listening, basically by the end, the whole idea, and I think this is what we mean by like, what is it like to be holistically masculine? One of the concepts of what we
Sure.
think it means is like all of these animals come by and try to fix it for Taylor in some way. His tower has crashed down. All of these animals then in the next page come by and like one of them wants him to get angry about it. One of them wants to go hurt somebody else to make him feel better.
They're
One
like
of them
different
wants to talk
solutions.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
different
solutions
solutions.
that they think he needs in order
Right.
to feel better.
And then this rabbit comes along and he's just there. Just sits and waits and sits in the discomfort of big emotion. And then
And it goes
Listen.
back through each one. It was like
Yeah.
the rabbit listened as Taylor.
yeah. Well, but first Taylor has to get to the point where he's okay starting that. And it's just
Yeah,
a waiting
yeah.
period. And I think that is the most important part.
Absolutely.
And to Jasmine's point of like making that clear enough for a kid made it clear for me as an adult reading it to my son of like, when my son has big emotions, I need to learn for me as a man, how can I be okay with his discomfort
Yeah.
and not work towards just taking it away so I can be comfortable.
Totally.
And then by the end, it's like the rabbit is listening as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor laughed and wanted to hurt somebody else. And then eventually, the rabbit listened as Taylor talked about his plan to build again. I think this is an applicable thing for our audience. If you're talking about vulnerability, go read a kid's book. Go read The Rabbit Listen. Go read Ben Washington. Because then you can hear in those stories how clear it is to have these emotional ideas, to feel left out, to feel like the new kid. What do you do with those things? They're asking clear questions that I think as adults sometimes we avoid.
And I think there's one of the reasons I think that those children's books are so powerful. I was talking about this with a client the other day. It feels like so many of our adult interactions are just the little kids in us in adult bodies trying to
Yeah.
like find connection.
Yes.
So I think
Yeah,
there's something so
totally.
powerful about reading those books that are so simple, is that it connects back to this really pure, simple thing that we all need, and like how to get there in a way that we as adults can make very complex.
So complex. Or we tell them to stop.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if it's just like it's overwhelming, like I notice in me, if I'm like Ben and my two friends are connecting, that's it like just points out my friendship wound.
Yeah.
Yes.
It
yeah.
points out my wound of like, I've had friends in the past who I just worried that they would want somebody else. I have this narrative that I was always the second choice. And like I was good enough to be a choice, but I wasn't good enough to be like the
Number
choice.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then my best friends are playing basketball together. I'm like, well, that's it. See ya.
Yep.
It was really fun. I better go start searching for somebody new now.
Yeah. Totally.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. You are the first female on the show, and we were joking before we hit record when I told her that. She was like, good, because I speak for all women.
All women.
That's correct. Every single one.
Jamie and I were like, even better, because we speak for all men in the world. So this
Yeah.
podcast episode is for everybody.
How,
right.
How did we find each other? That's amazing.
No, but seriously, I think one of the things that we've talked about with a few different guests is this concept, this idea of holistic masculinity. And what is it? There's lots of cultural messages
around what masculinity is or what it means to be a man. And I think that one of the things that I value, at least, is I want to learn what masculinity means, not just from other men. Like, it's valuable to me to have the females in my life that I can listen to and learn from and how they experience me. So I don't know if you've been asked this question or not, but what I'm curious about is, what does holistically masculine or like healthy masculinity, how would you define that?
Whoa, that's a really cool question. No, I've never been asked that. Okay.
No pressure.
I think maybe some of the like my favorite men in my life, something that they embody is like not the absence of strength, but like the ability to know how and when to use the strength that they have. I feel like I knew so many kind and strong men. I'm just I'm really thankful for that. I think what I thought was a better version of a man to me in my like maybe kid or teen brain was like one who was like gentle and a woman. I think as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, there's so much value in the wiring of a man's brain. But what makes it beautiful to me, like when it's like really healthy, is just the ability to have self-control, like maybe over the tools that you want to use. I'm angry in this moment. How do I display the anger? Is the anger kind of like displaying me, or am I like still displaying anger, but in a place of like self-discipline? Same with like love or kindness, like all of it. Just like a person who has well developed their fruit. And I just feel really fortunate because I actually do feel like I have several men in my life who are like that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that was a
big
beautiful,
time. Yeah.
beautiful answer. I think you said well developed their fruit. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Are you referring to like what Scripture talks about, the fruits of the Spirit?
I am.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I love that.
Yeah. I think some of our listeners know at this point maybe that I'm a tree nerd. So that's a great analogy for me specifically, because what it gets to is like you can't develop your fruit by just trying to focus on where you are seeing the fruit. You have to develop your fruit by developing the roots, by developing the soil,
Come on.
and by pruning the tree. To hear that from you, it hit me hard. It's not about which one of these attributes you have, but how you yield, how you wield, and how you use the fruit that you have to allow your masculinity to be a benefit to all of those around you. That's sick.
That's good. This came up in session the other day, which doesn't always come up, or the client brought it up actually, but they brought up the scripture, I don't know where it is, but where it talks about taking every thought captive. And specifically, this person was talking about how that scripture was used in sort of a shaming / like controlling way for certain behaviors or thoughts that somebody may have when they're younger that maybe the parents don't know what to do with, and so they just slap on the take every thought captive. And the way we talked, like explored it, and what it made me think about is like, what if I'm not a theologian, so I'm not going to say that this is true, but I'm just saying, what if when it talks about taking thoughts captive, it's not the type of captivity maybe that we tend to think of, which is like throw it in jail and lock it away and leave it there forever, but like a type of taking it captive that involves more care or attention, self-control, like you were saying. Like the anger is not a bad feeling, but if I can, I'm using air quotes, take it captive in the sense of paying attention to it and being curious about it and then responding, as
Yeah.
opposed to just letting the anger react in this way that can be very harmful and actually push people away when I really want them to be close. I think that's beautiful the way you were framing that in terms of how we, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but it was like, is the anger wearing you or are you wearing it, or however she said that?
Yeah. Displaying you.
Displaying you, yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful way to think about that.
Classic writer, always coming up with these lines. Yeah. To me, there's a lot of things that stick out that will stick with me, I think, from intentionally talking about this with you, which is like, can I explain, even as we're doing this podcast, in my head after today, I'm thinking, can I explain this in a children's book? If I can't explain this idea in a children's book, it might not be applicable to everybody. And much less like, not even everybody. If I can't explain this idea in a children's book, do I really know what it means to my heart? And then like your idea of masculinity, we were thinking of asking this question and both of us were a little nervous about like, it's a big question to ask. Like, what is holistic masculinity? And then you're just like coming in here with just such truth that I didn't know we needed.
Yeah.
So this is why we ask
Thank you,
everybody,
Jesus.
right? I think this is how you form, and then for everybody listening too, we're modeling something that we were nervous about.
Yeah.
Like asking everybody for their idea of what holistic masculinity is. And the reason we do it is the reason you just saw, because you can find effective tools through everybody you care about. So we're glad you came on here. We're going to have you back at some point,
Yes.
hopefully with the whole band even,
Yeah.
to talk about
would be dope.
that. And then as you keep writing bestsellers, be bringing you back. But Jazz, love you so much.
Love you
Thank you
too.
for taking time to do this with us. We'll end the way that we end every podcast, which you haven't heard yet, Jazz, but something we adapted from 12-Step Recovery, which is, we're glad you're here. Keep coming back. You're worth it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode. Listen, we're working on some really practical resources to help you connect more deeply with yourself and others. So if you head over to our website, 3percentco.com, you can learn more about that. The link will be in the show notes. And this is the part of the show where we ask you for some help. Listen, we don't have a big fancy production team. We're recording these in my therapy office in between sessions and in the margins of our life. We just really believe in the message that much. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and rarely would I take the time to review and rate a show, just because honestly, I forgot. It wasn't until we started doing this show that I realized doing that actually really does help these platforms notice our show and get the word out. And so if any of this is impactful to you, we would love it if you took a second to leave us a review, rate us, or if you want to just do it the old-fashioned way, text this link to a friend and say, hey, let's talk about this episode. Whatever you do, make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're listening to so you never miss an episode. We're really grateful you're here, and we'll see you next week.
So let's be honest.